When you're sick, you don't want to wait in a doctor's office. Skip the waiting room with waitfromhome.com. Brought to you by UMC Physician Network Services. Check into the clinic online or on your phone, and we'll call or text when your doctor's ready. Your comfort is important. Waitfromhome.com.
Welcome in, everybody, to another installment of the UMC Health System Avalanche-Journal pregame show. I'm Nick Kosmider, along here with my colleague Don Williams. Zach Long will join us in just a little bit. We're here inside the bowels of Amon G. Carter Stadium here on the campus of TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. And Don, this has become maybe a bigger game than we thought at the beginning of the year. Two 5-1 teams, two teams ranked in the BCS. Both are 2-1 in conference play. You know, this game's got all kinds of implications.
That's right, and the tone of this game, I think, changed for both teams in the last week because both of these teams have followed the same pattern. Week before last, TCU lost here at Amon Carter Stadium to Iowa State, which is something the Horned Frogs never do, and then they bounced back with a big win down in Waco last Saturday, knocking off Baylor 49-21. Similar scenario with the Red Raiders as they come in 2 weeks ago with that loss to Oklahoma. Nobody thought that they would knock off West Virginia, and then they pulled the upset of the week, not just in the Big 12, but nationally in college football with the win over West Virginia. And so now both of these teams have kind of a renewed enthusiasm and excitement looking forward to this game. This week we heard from Tommy Tuberville and also a couple of Texas Tech players, Seth Dagey and DJ Johnson, on the implications of this game.
If you look at it, I mean, there's not a whole bunch of people in Lubbock that really care too much about TCU people, and there's not many TCU people that care too much about Tech people. So I think it's going to be a fun rivalry, and I think that, you know, I'm excited that, you know, I'm part of it that gets to kick it off.
I mean, based off of our record last year, you know, a lot of people probably assumed that we weren't able to do things, you know, that we just weren't that team that could prove ourselves. And so we go out this week like we have done every week, and we go out there and we want to prove ourselves. We want to show that we do have the skill set, we do have the assets, we do have the players and the capability of going out there and being a contending team.
We didn't hardly talk about Oklahoma or Iowa State or about West Virginia. We talked about us playing our game, control what we can control, get better. Everybody working to get better.
Yeah, I think you know, after the game, I think we all realized that, you know, we can play at a very high level, and we're going to be very, very hard to beat if we go out there and prepare, have a great week of practice, and execute and play with a lot of energy and have a lot of fun. If we play that way each and every week, that we're going to be a very, very, very special group, and we're going to be hard to beat.
Welcome back to Amon G. Carter Stadium here on the campus at TCU. For all the skilled players that Texas Tech has on offense, the one question mark coming into the season was, what about the offensive line? There were experienced players at the tackles, Adrian Waddle, Terry McDaniel, and at center with DeVeritt Gallington. But the real question mark was the offensive guards. Three young guys, sophomores or redshirt freshmen, have come in and had to play a role. LaRaven Clark, Bo Carpenter, and Alfredo Morales. And so far, those guys have met the challenge.
First off, LaRaven's a beast, man. Like, that guy can get it done. If you ever can sit down and just watch, I don't know if you can tell on TV, but if you watch him run, I mean, it's incredible. He'll keep up with Jakeem on a speed sweep. It's incredible to watch. He plays really hard. He's going to be a great player here. And the other two, Bo and Alfredo, have been doing a really good job. You know, I think both of them were called to step up, and I think they both answered the challenge each and every week of doing their job, and they've been a huge factor for our offensive line, and they're going to continue to improve and be big-time players here.
It's going pretty good so far. Yeah. Progressing as we go by each game. All around, pretty much. For most things I've said, I feel like I've improved more using my hands. Feel good. We accomplished something. We can always improve on things, but you know, if you'd hurt anything, good. I'm a huge help. They're really good role models and set an example for the rest of us. You know, the standards we have to live to after they leave.
He's come a long way. The big thing with him, he's so athletic and so just, I mean, he's freakishly athletic. I mean, it's amazing. Especially like what Daggy mentioned, he ran down Jakeem. So, I mean, he plays really hard too. I think that's really good for him. He still has a couple of technique things to clean up, but just him being so athletic and his hard effort and just how hard he goes every day, that really just makes up for that and makes him a good player.
Well, you know, we started, I think last week, Bo Carpenter started like 70-something plays, played 70-something plays, and Alfredo played 10. But competition makes you better, and Bo Carpenter's done very good. He hadn't been beat out, but Alfredo competes against him every day. LaRaven Clark played his best game, I thought, of the year. He very athletic, as we know. He's very aggressive, played hard. He's one of those guys that gets in the trenches and, he understands it's a fight every down. I mean, you just got to fight hard and push and pull and do everything you can to either protect the quarterback or create a hole in the line of scrimmage. And he's really improved in the first 6 games. But as I talked about earlier in the year, he's got as much potential as any offensive lineman I've ever seen. If he can stay healthy and keeps his attitude, he's going to be he's going to be something to watch over the next 3 years.
Welcome back to Fort Worth. Zach Long with the Avalanche-Journal. Thanks to Nick for that feature on the offensive line. Now it's time for the keys to the game. Earlier this week, Don Williams and Nick Kosmider sat down in our Lubbock studios to discuss keys to the game between the Horned Frogs and the Red Raiders.
And now we're going to talk 4 keys to the game between Texas Tech and TCU. And Don, why don't you get us going?
One of the most important things, if Seth Doege is going to have a good game for the Red Raiders, will be the work of the offensive tackles. You have a couple of really intriguing matchups in this game because you have Adrian Waddle will be going up against Devontae Fields, who is probably a candidate for Freshman of the Year in the Big 12 Conference. He has 6.5 sacks, 11.5 tackles for loss, leads the Big 12 in both those categories, and he has made a tremendous impact on TCU's defense. And then on the other side of the line, you have Terry McDaniel not knowing exactly who he's going against. It could be Stanley Mapunga, who going into the season was a preseason All-Big 12 defensive end, but he suffered a foot injury last week, and it's going to be a game-time decision. Gary Patterson said earlier this week that Mapunga will need surgery at some point after the season. It's simply a matter of how much he can tolerate the pain.
Another key, this one for the Tech defense, will be something that they were able to do pretty well last week, and that's get some pressure on the quarterback. Again, Don, you go back and you look, and you're like, well, Texas Tech didn't even sack Geno Smith. But the thing that they were able to do was make him just move and get off his rhythm just so much, and when you're a real rhythm passer, that's going to help. The thing with Trevon Boykin, obviously, he played very well against Baylor, but he is making only his 3rd start. The redshirt freshman who's come in for Casey Pahal, who's left the team for his drinking-related issues, and so it's Boykin now, and the more that they can kind of get to him, throw him off his rhythm. He's a guy that likes to run as well, so hit him, get in his face, just make him uncomfortable. That's going to be one of the big keys.
Yeah, he had 3 interceptions 2 weeks ago, and then last week bounces back with 4 touchdown passes. All of those were on third down. Flipping it over to the offensive side of the ball for Texas Tech, everyone knows Red Raiders had a lot of misfortune last week at the receiver position, losing Bradley Marcus for the season, also losing Javon Bell for the season with a broken foot, and then it looks like the Red Raiders are going to be without Jason Morrow in this game. That means you're going to need some other guys to step up. That enormous amount of depth that Texas Tech had early in the year is reduced a little bit. So I think what you're going to see is this team will the versatility of Alex Torres will now come to the front. He's a guy who can play both inside and outside, and I think you'll see him on the field a lot. You could also see the reemergence of Austin Zuzalik, who's a senior and hasn't played much in the receiver corps this year, but remember earlier in his career, he had more than 30 catches, more than 400 yards, both in 2010 and in 2011. So you have possibly him resurfacing this week, and then I think it's going to be key on the inside for someone else to step up, be it Jakeem Grant having a big game, possibly a Tyson Williams who hasn't had a whole lot of catches, but it's going to be critical not only this game but throughout the rest of the season that some other guys in the receiving corps kind of elevate their games.
Yeah, maybe they'll even put Cameron Wright in there as a guy who can come in and back up Jason Morrow. Yeah, sure. Right. And finally, I think an important thing for the Red Raiders to do is going to try to establish some sort of run game. Obviously, you talk about that, and pretty much any coach will say that. The Red Raiders are a little different because they're not going to be a team that's going to run the ball 50 times a game. They're going to be throwing it, but it is still important to kind of soften up that TCU run defense, which has been very stout this year, led by linebacker Kenny Kane. They're number 9 against the run in the country, and so you're going to want guys like Kenny Williams to be able to sort of bang through that line a little bit. And obviously, Sadell Foster was a guy who, last week had a huge 53-yard run. He can give you kind of a different look, so that's going to be another key. That'll do it for our keys to the game, TCU and Texas Tech.
All right, now it's time for some Big 12 predictions. We got 4 games this week. We'll get it started first. Nick Kosmider, Iowa State, Oklahoma State. The Cyclones, a 2-touchdown underdog. Are you buying that? No,
I'm not buying it. Oklahoma State scored 20 points against Kansas last week. Don't have their offense going the way it usually is. Iowa State played strong against Kansas State, and coming off a win at TCU the week before. I like the Cyclones.
Yeah, Iowa State defense really, really good, and I think they're much better under Barnett at quarterback. I got Iowa State in that game. They get the win in Stillwater. Don?
I'll go with Oklahoma State to win at home. Still a pretty tough place to play there at Stillwater, even though they can't, not supposed to use the paddles on the side of the stadium.
Right.
I'll still take the Cowboys.
I think that's going to hunt them. All right, I guess not.
All right, I'll go right back to Don for this one. Try not to laugh too hard. Kansas at Oklahoma.
Kansas has shown some bright spots against Kansas State, and also again last week. But they're against Oklahoma State, but they're still not in a position where they're going to be able to threaten Oklahoma very much. So I got OU, of course.
Yeah, I think OU way too much momentum right now. They roll big over the Jayhawks. Nick?
Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's all you really need to say. You don't need any more reasoning than that. All right, we'll go to one with a little bit maybe of a tougher pick, and I'll come right back to you, Nick. How about Baylor at Texas?
You could call this one the Desperation Bowl.
Yes,
two teams that do not want to lose this game. The loser has a 3-game losing streak and 0-3 in the conference. I mean, I keep thinking Texas is going to step up, and maybe this will be the week that they do it. I got the Longhorns, but I'm not ultra confident in the pick.
Yeah, I think the Baylor running game gets back going. Nick Florence gets back on track. They beat Texas in Austin. Don?
Well, which they have done that recently, but it's hard for me to picture this Longhorns team going that far off the track. So
I can.
Now they did lose Jackson Jeffco for the season,
yes,
but I think the Longhorns will bounce back after OU. There's so much pressure on them in Austin. I think they'll bounce back and knock off Baylor.
All right, guys, we'll close with the big one this week. Maybe a little less because of the loss that Texas Tech handed to West Virginia. But Nick, how about Kansas State going into Morgantown against West Virginia?
Yeah, I mean, another great game. I think that it's proven that there's just no real reason to bet against Kansas State at this point. I mean, you can look at the matchups. You can say Geno Smith, still a Heisman frontrunner, even though he didn't have his best performance. But it's just hard to bet against Kansas State. So disciplined, so sound. Colin Klein, another Heisman Trophy candidate. I like Kansas State.
All right, 2 secret words today. Ball control. Kansas State controls the game, controls the clock. They win in Morgantown. Don Williams.
I don't know why, but I actually picked the Mountaineers in this one. So.
Wow.
How about that? West Virginia goes from number 5 in the nation. They lose one game, and now all of a sudden it's West Virginia's going to lose again. I'll take the Mountaineers.
Such is the world of college football, guys.
I'll take the Mountaineers to bounce back and deal Kansas State its first loss of the season.
That would certainly shake things up in the Big 12 if that happened.
It would.
All right, there's our Big 12 picks for the week. We're going to be right back after commercial break, and we'll break down TCU, Texas Tech from Fort Worth. You're on the UMC Health System Avalanche-Journal pregame show.
When you're sick, you don't want to wait in a doctor's office. Skip the waiting room with waitfromhome.com. Brought to you by UMC Physician Network Services. Check into the clinic online or on your phone, and we'll call or text when your doctor's ready. Your comfort is important. Waitfromhome.com.
Welcome back into the UMC Health System Avalanche-Journal pregame show. Now it's time to get down to the business of picking this game that will be here in Fort Worth tomorrow afternoon between Texas Tech and TCU. A lot of intriguing matchups in this game, a lot of momentum for Texas Tech coming off the win over West Virginia. And Don Williams, I'm going to start with you this time. Can you just give me your impressions of where you think this game's going tomorrow?
I think it'll be a good test for both teams. TCU is at 5-1 is maybe a little bit farther along than what some people might have expected. At the same time, this is a Horned Frogs team that's really had to overcome a lot of injury and a lot of adversity with the loss of Casey Pahal a couple of weeks ago. This week, Gary Patterson, the Horned Frogs coach, said that once that situation with Pahal was settled and he was off the team, he felt his team got to practice with what he called a little more peace than what they had in the past month. With that being said, though, I think Tech can take advantage of the Horned Frogs maybe in a couple of areas. TCU's offense a little bit questionable with Trevon Boykin being up and down the last couple of weeks, and also big question marks at running back with as they still try to overcome not having Wayman James for the rest of the season and probably not having Matthew Tucker, at least not at full speed, tomorrow. So they're missing some weapons. And then last week they have Stanley Mapunga, their defensive end, who was preseason All Big 12. He injures a foot, and he may play tomorrow, but even if he does, he's going to be really battling some pain issues. So I think the Red Raiders have a good opportunity to come in here and steal a win. I got Tech winning 27-23.
Nick, your impressions of Texas Tech TCU?
You know, this is an exciting matchup, and kind of the biggest thing as we get back to is Tommy Tuberville has talked ever since this summer about how this is going to be the new rivalry game, he thinks, for Texas Tech. You know, A&M leaving, that was thought to be Tech's kind of number one rival. The Aggies left town for the SEC. And so now you have this prime position, a team that's within 5.5 hours of each other. So there's that kind of common ground and that whole pride of Texas thing. I think that's going to really add to the atmosphere. Now, as for the game, you know, we got to see if Seth Deggy can put together consecutive performances like this. Obviously, he was fantastic against West Virginia, could barely miss. He's also going to be without some guys. Tech also, Don mentioned TCU's weapons. Tech is missing some as well. We don't know if Jason Morrow is going to play. Javon Bell and Bradley Marquez won't, but he's got his top targets like Darren Moore and Eric Ward, and this team just has so much depth there that I don't think that's going to bother him. But TCU's front line is very strong. That offensive line that we talked about a little bit earlier in the show, they're really going to be put to the test this week. But I think they're going to be up to it. Texas Tech is rolling, and I don't think we're going to see the same kind of letdown that we did last year. This team is more experienced, and as Adrian Waddle told us this week, a lot more hungry. I have Texas Tech winning 31-24.
Yeah, you know, Nick, I agree with you completely. The key thing is I think you go to that letdown last year, and Tommy Tuberville talked about it before the season and many times during this season. And this week I think they've done the right things. They shut down a lot of the media exposure and didn't let the kids' heads get in the clouds too much. They're focused on the task at hand, and I think right now Texas Tech has a lot of momentum going. Their offense is figured out, and I think their defense has improved enough. They're going to cause TCU some problems tomorrow. I think they're going to have a much better balance between the running and the passing game. And I'm going to stick with you guys here. I think Texas Tech's going to go over TCU. I think it might be a little bit of a bigger margin. I'm going to go 42-24 Texas Tech over TCU. Well, there you have it, our expert picks, or as expert as we can get. For full coverage of TCU, Texas Tech, guys, keep it locked into us. Don and Nick are going to have full stories for you. We'll have all kinds of photos and videos from tomorrow's game. You know where to go for it. LubbockOnline.com, RedRaiders.com for full coverage of TCU, Texas Tech. This has been the UMC Health System Avalanche-Journal pregame show. For Don Williams and Nick Kosmider, I'm Zach Long. We'll see you next time.